Hello students, today we're having a recap of today's lecture, What is Myth, on Chapter 1 of Thury and Davini's Introduction to Mythology. Be sure and do your assignments for Tuesday. You need to take the little quiz on Blackboard. It's available. It's inside the first folder, the first content folder for Chapter 1. Be sure and do that before tomorrow afternoon. Read Chapter 2 for Tuesday and be ready to take a short reading quiz. There will be materials provided in the content folder for Chapter 2 also. Today we talked about what is myth, the traditional narrative used as a designation of reality. We talked about their entertainment value, their explanation value, and how they focus on the values and important tensions in the culture. Myth is not science, although it is often based upon the best science of its day, and scientists can often learn science from myths. The focus is on true values, not so much upon true facts, although mythologists are the people who are telling the stories use the best understanding they had of the world at the time. Our text talks about urban legend and myth. Myth and legend, they talk about legend having a historical basis of some kind, although myths also often have a historical basis, such as the Trojan War. The characteristics of oral transmission are important to remember. There's a psychology reality to these different myths and legends both. They focus on life together, and concerns, conflicts, and fears are all involved. And we also talked about interesting urban myth that became a media myth, the idea of Godzilla, or Gujara in Japanese. And this came from concerns in Japanese culture about nuclear power, nuclear destruction, and the effects upon society. Also, the Japanese society was going through many, many changes in the post-World War II period. Oral literature, whether it's myth or legend, is subject to redaction, in which various stories can be harmonized. And there are an important aspect of verbal art, myth, story, all of these things is performance. So the best performances will push a myth forward through time, and the strongest myths are the ones that have the greatest entertainment value and also the most meaning to people. Myths reflect the culture and the aspects of the culture with the greatest tensions. Franz Boas talked about myth being a mirror of culture, but Melville Jacobs more astutely saw it as really a reflection of the tensions, almost more a movie or a play of culture. We talked about Heracles. Pronunciation is also Hercules in Latin. There's a proxy battle between Zeus and Hera because Hera hated him because he was the product of Zeus's relationship with a different woman, an earth human. Fate and freedom are bound up in his conflicts, and also death and immortality. And interesting, another Greek myth in this area is from Aeschylus' Oresteia. His play, what happened is that Agamemnon's son had to deal with the implications of Agamemnon's sacrifice of Iphigenia, his sister, that is Orestes' sister. He had to sacrifice Iphigenia in order to get the winds that would allow him to go on the war. His wife, Iphigenia's mother, of course, was very upset about that, Clytemnestra. And when Agamemnon returned from the war, Clytemnestra and her lover Aegisthus murdered Agamemnon. Orestes then has to avenge his father, but to avenge his father, he has to commit matricide. He is tormented by the Furies, and Athena eventually obtains his acquittal in trial. But here's another example of someone who had to use his free will, but his fate was closed about him. We talked about etiology, usually spelled E-T-I-O-L-O-G-Y. Etiological myths included the raven liberating the water from petrel and coyote and the monster. Science and myth are discussed by Eliade as both being used to master the universe. We discussed the Trojan War. Here we have the Judgment of Paris with Aphrodite, Hera, and Athena. Paris, of course, chooses Aphrodite. These are the different aspects of what we have in the Trojan War. And then following the Odyssey, science in the Iliad, Troy 7a in the archaeology, navigation in the Aegean, power structures in ancient times, weapons and metallurgy, all these related to science, either political science or metallurgy or archaeology. But just as important are the aspects of personal life, including the life of Penelope, Telemachus growing up without a father and still needing to become a man, and then the fates of soldiers who were fated to suffer and die because of choices made by their commanders, Agamemnon and Achilles. So we have lessons of war, lessons of passion, lessons of family life, all in relation to the Iliad. And there are lessons for us in, we have to be careful in drawing conclusions from these myths, because we need to understand the myth in its own time and place and the myth in its own language. But we can do that, and once we do that, there are lots of very important things that we can learn. This important book by Jonathan Shea called Achilles in Vietnam, about how the Iliad helped Vietnam veterans suffering from post-traumatic stress syndrome, help them to deal with their experiences in war. So finally, be sure and take that quiz on Blackboard, read chapter 2. I'll be ready for that short quiz, and that's it.